Okay, welcome everybody. How you doing? Jonathan Lipp here from the Big Apple Film Festival, and we are here today with our guest for our. Hello, how you doing? We are
Hi.
here, hi. We are here today with our guest Bonnie McKee, and the panel topic today is music in film. And so Bonnie has had quite an extensive and illustrious career in the world of music, and now she is in the world of filmmaking. She has a film called April Kills the Vibe, which is screening at the Big Apple Film Festival. It's screening virtually all weekend, as well as at the Drive-In, which is taking place tomorrow, November 14th, and Sunday, November 15th at the Demarest Farms Drive-In Theater in Hillsdale, New Jersey. So you can see the film either online, or you can check out the Drive-In schedule and see it there. So thank you so much, Bonnie, for being here. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
All right. So Bonnie, why don't we start? Let's talk a little about your history. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in music, and then sort of how that how you made the transition into filmmaking?
Yeah. I grew up watching MTV, and I was obsessed with music videos specifically. And I didn't realize until much later in life that that was kind of why I got into music. Was because I loved the costumes, I loved the cinematography, I loved the colors, I loved the characters and the stories. And then I also happened to have a knack for songwriting and poetry and singing. So I started out classically trained, and I started writing my own songs at 12, and I got a record deal at 16, moved down to Los Angeles by myself, and I've been fighting the good fight ever since. Yeah, so I got a record deal. I did the artist thing for a while, and then I got into writing songs for other artists, and I got really lucky and made friends with some big pop stars, and ended up writing 10 #1 songs accidentally. And then I went back to doing the artist thing while I was doing the songwriter thing, and I realized that I wasn't really able to spread my wings as much as I wanted to, packing a big emotional story into a 3.5-minute pop song is a fun challenge. But I really love the idea of writing a story, and I get to keep going. I get to have more than one arc. I get to have different characters. It's not just from one person's point of view. So I started experimenting with screenwriting, and then in quarantine, I decided to write a short film and make it. And that's how I got here.
Was filmmaking ever a thought from earlier on, or is this really just a more recent thing, since the quarantine thing started?
It was one of those things where I knew I always wanted to do it, but I figured it would be like later in life, and then all of a sudden it was later in life, and I really had tunnel vision about, like, I want to be a pop star, I want to be in the pop music world. And then I did that, and I kind of won that rat race. And I wanted to challenge myself and see what else I could do. I've done some acting over the years. I was in a movie called August Rush with Robin Williams and Kerry Russell, and that was a cool experience. And then I did the CSI thing, and as everyone ends up getting killed off on CSI. And I just recently was a guest star on Darren Chris's show Royalties. So I've done some acting over the years, but what I found as an actor is that I didn't like not having control over the scene. I didn't like not having any creative input with the writing, with the script. And, it can be kind of patronizing to try to talk to a director about, like, well, what if I feel like the character might do this? And they're like, yeah, whatever, shut up and read the lines, And so originally when I set out to do April Kills the Vibe, I was just gonna be shooting a scene for an acting reel. But all of the scenes that I got that other people had written didn't connect with me. And I was like, I'll just write my own scene. And then once I started writing, it was 10 pages later, and I was like, this is not just a scene, this is a short film. So I was like, well, screw it. I'm just gonna do it. I've wanted to do this for a long time. I have the time, everything's shut down. So we put together a skeleton crew and shot a little short film in 2 days.
Very nice. Now, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put it into the Q&A box. And let me ask you, can you tell us a little bit about April Kills the Vibe?
Yeah, April Kills the Vibe is based on a true story, sadly. I don't know if anybody here will have been able to have seen it yet, because it's playing at the Drive-In Theater tomorrow, and I'm not sure if it's already up on the festival. But in a nutshell, and this is a weird way to put it, it's kind of a dark comedy about rape, about sexual assault. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I've been sober now for coming up on 9 years. And this was a moment in my life that was a rock bottom. And I wanted to focus less on the assault itself and more on the aftermath. And it's based on an actual situation that I experienced after a wild night out, where I called my friend that I had gone out with and asked her what had happened. And I was met with a lot of slut shaming. And, you're a big girl, you can take care of yourself, I'm not your babysitter. And, I was devastated because as women, we're supposed to be there for each other. But I also realized actually when I was writing the script that I have been that girl. I've had the friend that wanders off when she's drunk, and I'm like, well, I mean, what am I gonna do? I can't force you to go home. I can't force you in a cab. And I've been on the other end of that. And that's why I chose to play both characters in the film, because I think it's a familiar story that a lot of women have been on both sides of.
So in terms of working as a songwriter and now as a filmmaker, do you, addressed this before, but do you see any sort of similarities between the two mediums?
Definitely. And, I've been the past few years really researching screenwriting and hero's journey and all of that kind of stuff. And really a pop song a good pop song has its own little hero's journey. And wherever you choose to start, if you start at the bottom and then, have your glorious moment in the chorus, or if you start good and then but everything went bad in the chorus, there's definitely a formula. And I read a book called Save the Cat, which I know every screenwriter has read. And it really, I saw a lot of similarities, and it really clarified things for me. And because it took me a while as a songwriter, because I started out just singer-songwriter, playing piano, doing whatever came to me. And then I started working with the big heavy hitters, Max Martin, and all of these big producers that are legends and have done everything from Ace of Base to Britney Spears to Katy Perry to Ariana Grande. And they really have a formula. And once it clicked for me that there was a formula, and that doesn't mean that it's soulless, but it made it a lot easier for writing to be my job, because you have to show up every day and come up with something. And, if you're just waiting for inspiration to strike every day, then it may not work. So you have to kind of have some guidelines to go by, and it makes it a lot easier to put something together.
For the filmmakers that are watching, very often independent filmmakers would love to be able to get, sort of a known song, onto their film. It certainly helps with the marketability of it. How would an emerging independent filmmaker approach a songwriter like yourself or a record label in order to acquire rights, perhaps to a known, copyrighted song?
It's tough, because even songs that I have co-written, first of all, big popular songs for the most part are usually not written by one person. There's a team of people involved. And each of those people on that team, it could be 5, 6 people, it could be sometimes 15 when you get into urban stuff, because they're using samples and all these things. And each of those writers has their own publishing deals and their own labels, and there's just a lot of red tape. So even if you're able to get one person, like I've had people approach me about using my songs in films, and I'm like, yes, I want to give that to you, but I can't guarantee that everyone else on the team is going to approve that. So my advice would be, and you see this a lot and it's very effective, to find an unsigned artist or a smaller indie artist and have them cover the song that you want to have in your film. Because the master there are two sides to a song. There are two sides of rights. There's publishing, which is the writers, and then there's the master, which is the recording. And usually a record label owns the recording. If you work with an independent artist, like I'm an independent artist, so I own my masters, I don't have a label. So it's easier for me to sync things. So I get a lot of syncs on my own music because there is no red tape on the side of the record label, because I am the label. So I would say your best bet is to cover the song, and then you will still have to pay for the publishing rights, but it cuts a lot of money out of of having to pay for the master. And also, you know, it was a weird question because I haven't really had to deal with that because I make my own music, you know? So, and most people in the creative field have a friend that makes music. And so call upon your friends. You know, I did the score for April Kills the Vibe with my boyfriend. We have been quarantining together, and it was my first time scoring anything. And we just kind of got together and made it happen. So if you have creative friends, bring them in. You know, you never know what people are capable of.
So, so generally speaking, the publishing rights would be a lot less expensive than the master recording.
Well, yes, it may still be expensive depending on the song, but it is going to be half as expensive, you know, if you're just doing that.
Gotcha. And now, there's a couple of questions in the Q&A box, and I'll get to them in just a moment. For April Kills the Vibe, how did you go about the score? Like, you know, how do you go about determining what the right type of music is for April Kills the Vibe, and also for any other filmmakers? What's the best way to approach that?
You know, sorry, one second. I just had an unexpected guest show up. So when I tried a bunch of different things. First I tried taking the film with no music, no score in it, and just like putting other songs that I thought might be cool to hear behind it, and just watching it and seeing if the mood felt right. And I tried upbeat stuff, I tried electronic stuff, I tried sad ballady stuff, and I was like, because I mean, because I'm a songwriter, I have a computer full of songs that I could choose from, luckily, but I was just like, I think that this needs to feel like an actual score, and I felt like having music that had lyrics and stuff on it was going to be distracting. So I just thought, especially, I really had so much fun writing this score actually, because I sat down with Andy Harry, my co-writer, and we just sat at the piano in the living room and we were trying all these complicated chords. And then I was like, what if we just started like this? Ding, 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 ding. And then I wanted to do a melody that kind of revealed itself. So I added one note every few bars where it was dun, 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 dun. So it would repeat the same thing and add a note every time. So it was almost like you were recalling the things that happened the night before, where it's like, oh, I feel weird, what happened? Oh, and then you have a flash of this and a flash of that. And then by the end of it, it's like this epic, tragic saga being told through the melody. So it was really fun. I've never been able to write like that before. And I look forward to doing more of it.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit more about April Kills the Vibe shortly. Let me just get a couple of questions. Muhammad asks, thank you for sharing your story with us. Given how important music videos were in your formative years, do you have a visual in mind when you develop music? Or does the music inspire a visual, or both?
It goes both ways. Sometimes I'll have an idea for a music video and then I'll write a song to match it. And then sometimes I have a song, and usually while I'm writing a song, I will have a vision for a music video. And that's the fun part. And so it was hard being a songwriter for other artists because I have no say in what that music video looks like. So when I'm writing that song with the artist, I'm having all these visions in my head and dreams of what I would want it to look like. And then when it comes out, it looks nothing like what I saw in my head. And it's kind of devastating because I'm such a visual artist, and it's hard to have no say in that, which is why I continue to do my artist thing and I got into filmmaking.
All right, thank you. And Emily asks, what do you hope people will take away from April Kills the Vibe?
You know, it's a sad story. I tried my best to make a comedy about sexual assault, which is kind of a tall order. But I didn't want it to be just like so dark and depressing and awful. But I think that it's important to take a look at, you know, first of all, it's easy to blame your friends for not taking care of you or not looking out for you. But really there's only one person to blame in a situation like that, and that is, you know, the predator. And also, and this is controversial to say, but you know, being a recovering alcoholic, I've had a good long look at my part in things over the years. And would that have happened if I had been Not blackout drunk? Probably not. I probably wouldn't have gotten in a car with a stranger. But that being said, it's sad that we live in a world where a girl can't just get blackout drunk if she wants to. That it's like inherently dangerous to be intoxicated while female. So I kind of wanted to look at all the different angles of that, and what our responsibilities are to each other on a wild night out where everyone's kind of on one, you know.
So in terms of working in music and film, would you ever see yourself getting into composing music for film? Is that something maybe you would consider? Because you did it for your own film. So I'm wondering if perhaps this is something you would pursue maybe with the studio films, some larger budget films, independent films.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's actually in my later years of being a songwriter, I really have focused more on making music for film and television, because movies and TV shows send out briefs for what they're looking for, and it takes out a lot of the guesswork, because it's just like, okay, cool, I know the vibe, I know they'll have a reference song, and I'm like, okay, something that with this kind of energy. And I really love being able to tell a story through someone else's eyes. It's really fun for me. So I've already been doing a lot of that, but as far as actual scoring, yes, it was such a fun, interesting experience. So I would definitely be interested in doing more of that. Of course, the project would have to be right, but yeah, I definitely like to do that. And it's also like in the competitive industry of songwriting and radio, which is, you know, there's 10 people on the radio at a time. It costs a lot of money to get on the radio. Movie and TV, the studios still pay for songs, and that's really where a lot of struggling songwriters can make money still, because we don't get paid for our time. We don't get paid to show up at the studio and write a song. We only get paid if it gets cut, and we only get paid if it's a hit. So to have someone take your song and put it in a film or a television show is really kind of the dream.
And again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A box. So we have a section in our film festival for music videos. Mm-hmm. Have you ever gotten involved with making music videos? And the other part of this question is, where do you sort of see that world going? Do you think music videos is still going to be a thing in the future as an option for filmmakers? Or do you think that's a dying industry or a growing industry?
I think it's growing, honestly. I mean, just because we don't really see music videos on TV anymore. Nobody watches TV anymore as much. You know, everything is on demand. And I think it's a great way to start. I mean, that was really how I got my start. And though I never took directing credit on the music videos that I worked on, I came up with all the ideas. I wrote shot lists. I did the whole thing. Honestly, this is really sad to admit, but, you know, I started doing this when I was 16 years old. And in my head, it was just like, oh, that's what like the older men do. Like you hire like an old male director, and then they come in and they help you see your vision through. And it's the same thing with production. That was really an idea that had been beaten into me over the years, that like, you're just a top liner. You just write melody lyrics, and then you let the big boys do their work and do the production and do, you know. And so really it's only been like the past, I guess, 10 years that I really started thinking about that and being like, well, why can't, I mean, obviously there have been great female directors, but I felt like it wasn't possible for me. I felt like maybe I wasn't cut out for that. But then once I was dating a director for a long time, and I saw all the things that he did, and I was like, I do all of that. Why am I not taking the credit for this? I'm doing all of the creative work. The only thing I don't know a whole lot about is like the actual camera, but that's also not the director's job necessarily. Like that's what you have a DP for. So I think that as far as music videos go, that's why I was able to kind of turn out this short film so quick, because I have a lot of experience being on sets for music videos. I love making music videos. And I think that it's a great way for filmmakers to start, to just like be on set, see how it works, figure out. It's also fun because you have to figure out how to tell a story without any dialogue. So it's kind of a fun, like, miming experience where you have to tell a story just through pictures. So I think that I don't think it's a dying art form at all. And I love that there are film festivals that award music videos. I had no idea that existed until I got on Film Freeway and was like looking around and doing this whole festival circuit that I knew absolutely nothing about. I was like, you can put music videos and these things. Like, had I known that, I would have been doing this for years. So no, I think it's a great exercise. And especially now that I know that people can win awards for it and stuff.
Yeah, there are some film festivals that are dedicated solely to music videos. There's one in Austin, and I believe there's a few in Canada. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So you think with with like YouTube and these and like Vivo and all these kind of things, you think it's actually a growing world for music
So yeah,
videos?
and I think that it's a great way to showcase what you're capable of doing, storytelling wise, and just cinematically speaking, what you're capable of. It's also a lot easier than having, I mean, I've edited many music videos in my day, and they're just like 3.5, 4 minutes, and having to edit 13.5 minutes was just like a big deal. It was a lot more work than just, I mean, I've lost my mind just editing a 3.5 minute music video. So music videos are a good way to kind of get your hands dirty and learn about pacing and how to tell a story. So I would encourage anybody to do it.
So Ali has a question. What is your preferred way to be contacted to score a stop motion animated series? Ali loves your work and your approach.
Thank you so much. You can reach me on Instagram, and it's just my name, @Bonnie McKee.
All right. And then we have another in the chat box here. What's your opinion on TV shows that are historical and only have a modern pop music soundtrack, like Dickinson or The Great? Is it a fad? Are you familiar with those?
I'm not.
Okay.
But I mean, as far as like, you mean period pieces that have modern music? Was that kind of the question?
Yeah, I guess a historical, like a period piece that only has modern music. Yeah.
I mean, I think it can be interesting. Yeah, I've definitely seen things in that vein. And I mean, I think that it's like sometimes can feel like a stretch. I feel like I'm being sold something by the creators, where it's like, look, we're hip, we're cool, and like young people will still like this historical thing. I don't think it's really necessary. I think that like good storytelling is good storytelling, but it can be used in a really interesting way. I really liked Marie Antoinette back in the day. They did that, and they also like threw in some like Converse underneath her like Victorian gown. I don't know. I mean, I think if it's done tastefully, that it can be really interesting. So I'm not against it.
All right. So in the Q&A box, Emily asks, I guess, now that you're a filmmaker, what are some of your favorite TV shows right now?
I just started watching, what's it called? The Undoing on HBO, the Nicole Kidman show. There's only 3 episodes of it, but oh my God, so amazing. Succession.
One of those actors from the show is just on our last panel.
Oh, no way. Oh my God. I'm really blown away by that show. I love it. Yeah. But I think the most exciting show recently for me was Succession. And also that soundtrack, or the theme of that show, I listened to that when I was trying to decide what to do for April Kills the Vibe. And it's just hypnotic and says so much. I mean, you hear every character and every instrument. It's really, really well done. So I kind of like borrowed from that for my own score. I really love that TV has gotten so cinematic, and that you're seeing all these huge A-list stars. I mean, it's nothing new now, but just like growing up, it was always like, oh, like they're just on TV and not in the movies, so they don't matter, and now you see all of these like legends on the small screen, and it's really exciting. I also loved The Morning Show. It was incredible. And then I love comedies like Dave and Pen 15, and I don't know, there's a lot of comedies that kind of speak to my millennial generation, with a lot of nostalgia and stuff. So I love that too.
So as you move forward in your filmmaking career, do you think you'll want to focus more so like on comedy, or do you think you'd want to focus on drama? Where do you see everything going?
That's a good question. And I've been kind of asking myself that. I think that what I've found over the years of just like experimenting with screenwriting is that I have a hard time writing like straight face drama. I think there's always a little bit of humor, usually dark humor. But I love, like, oh God, I should know her name, but Fleabag. She wrote Fleabag. She's Killing Eve. She's really like an idol. Like I watch her stuff and I feel like it's dark, it's funny, it's real and raw. And I'd kind of love to be a singing, dancing version of that, you know? And yeah, I do love comedy. I think it keeps people engaged, and it reaches a wider audience when you can have even Succession, which is like very dark, is still really funny. So I love a dark comedy. I think that's probably where I'll end up.
Very nice. And, just out of curiosity, like having been out in music and now in film, do you have any favorite music films about music, things like that, even a documentary perhaps?
I loved The Runaways. It was so beautiful. And the director is famous for doing music videos, and that really showed through in the movie. It was like watching a 2-hour music video, which I just loved. And I also loved, let's see, what was was it called Queen or Bohemian Rhapsody?
Oh, yeah, Bohemian Rhapsody. Yep.
That was a good one too. Yeah, it's funny watching movies about music because a lot of times they get it wrong. Like they don't actually know how it works in the studio or how the songwriting process goes. But it's inspiring, and yeah, and I'd really like to incorporate some of that into my future writing as well, because I actually have the experience and I know how it all works,
You have a lot of sort of mainstream directors over the years who have actually directed music videos as well. John Landis directed the Thriller video. Scorsese directed Michael Jackson's Bad video. Would you ever see yourself going in that direction, like going from directing independent films, studio films, to maybe going into music video
Absolutely.
directing?
I mean, I've done so many of my own, and I've creative directed and been heavily involved in other ones. I think that I was like not confident enough to be like, I'm the director. I was asked to direct a very big music video for a big iconic pop star, and they ended up just not shooting a video at all. So at least I felt a little bit better about that. But I got to go through the process of, putting together a budget, putting together all the shots that I wanted to do, the styling. I had everything worked out, and then like something went weird with the label and it didn't work out. But I love it. I would love to do that. I think that, because there's also an element of fantasy that comes with music videos, and that's something that's harder to do in film, but that's something I really want to do. I have another project that I've been working on that is very fantastical and almost leaning sci-fi, but still dealing with very like real human experience. And I want it to look like a music, I want my whole life to look like a music video. Like if you've seen the movie April Kills Vibe, people, a few different festivals suggested that I submit for set design. And I was like, it's just my house. Like my house is just full of colors and looks like Clockwork Orange, and I'm just very much affected by my environment. And I feel like sometimes production design is kind of an afterthought, and same with styling as well. And so when you see something where the styling or the production design is like, they really pay close attention to detail, it makes a big difference. I feel like it really brings you into a world. It really creates a world, rather than like, okay, well, let's just like put some IKEA furniture up and light it cute and there you go. I think that furniture and setting says so much about the character. So
would you think it's more difficult to direct a music video or a short film like April Kills the Vibe? Or which one do you think is more challenging?
Short film is a lot harder, I think, because it's being judged harder. And with music videos, you a lot of times you have a master performance, and then you have like, maybe you have a narrative, maybe you don't. So it's more of just like an art piece where you don't have to worry about plot holes. You don't have to worry about continuity. You really can just shoot a bunch of pretty stuff and edit it together however you want. So I think it's a lot easier to take just a bunch of beautiful images and curate them together in a certain order and like edit it rhythmically than it is to tell a story. Because, and also thinking about like Foley having to do all of the background sounds, and it's a lot. I found it to be a lot more difficult to do a short, but the reason that I did it was because I just wanted to get my hands dirty and see what I'm capable of. Because I was like, can I do this? I don't know. Let's find out. And so I'm really glad I did it. And I just know that the next one I do is going to be so much better because I made so many mistakes on this one. And so I know what not to do, which is just as important as knowing what to do.
And what would you say is, in terms of writing, now you're a screenwriter, what do you find more challenging, writing music or writing a script for a film?
I don't have enough experience writing scripts or films. I mean, I've dabbled, but this is the first thing I've ever been brave enough to put out. You know, I've written a bunch of stuff and like shared it with a couple people, but I've really been pretty shy about it because I'm such a perfectionist, and I don't want to show anything to anyone until I am certain that it's good. And so this was kind of an exercise of just like sort of jumping off a building and, and hoping I can fly. And I don't really know if I'm good at it or not. This is just an experiment. So hopefully people like it.
Yeah. How did you go about getting the rest of the cast? How did you go about getting the crew together? What was your process like? Did you know them already, or did you go through outside?
It was mostly friends, and then the DP Dawn was suggested by a friend of mine, and she brought down her crew. It was a very small crew because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so everyone was wearing 10 hats, you know, but it was a great team effort, and we got it done. Daniel, my supporting actor, co-star, was a friend of a friend, and we're friends on Instagram. And I was like, hey, I think he'd be good for the part of Ziggy, and he killed it, and he brought a lot to it and was kind of like riffing. So it was really nice to have like an experienced comedic actor on set to play off of, you know. And then I honestly, like, I wanted to play both parts. I wasn't going to play both parts at first because I felt like that would be like very narcissistic of me to be my first film and be like, look, I'm just going to do everything. But it was kind of out of necessity for the pandemic. And then once, like I said, once I started writing it, I was like, wait, I am both of these girls. And so I ran it by a couple of friends who were more experienced in the film world. And I was like, is this a terrible idea? And a couple of them were like, maybe. And I was like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to do it. And I did it. And I think it works because there is an emotional justification behind it. It's not just like, I just want to like see myself on film. It's like, there's a reason why I did it. And it also was easier because I wasn't able to rehearse with anyone in quarantine, you know? So I just did it all myself. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. So would you consider turning April Kills the Vibe into a feature film?
April Kills the Vibe is kind of inspired by a larger idea that I had that I was thinking would be a show. So if you can imagine April and Lola being rivals in the pop music industry, then that makes it even more interesting. I mean, I wanted to tell a story that was not leaning on the gimmick of my being a hit songwriter. I wanted to just see if the emotional story would carry itself. And I feel like it did. And so now if I take that story and insert like a whole other level of my musical expertise, I think it could be really interesting. I want to do a show about, you know, seeing the personal lives of the songwriters and artists, and seeing the personal things that happen, the tragedies and struggles they go through, and then watching those become songs and seeing kind of the story behind how a song is born. And also just the cutthroat industry that we have to survive in as sensitive, creative people. So yes, I'd like to, I think it would be more of a show because there are a lot of different story arcs, and I think it'd be hard to wrap that all up into just a film. But I don't know. I mean, this is not a formal pitch. This is just something I've been playing with. And I just wanted to see if I could make a short film, and I did it.
Would you ever consider getting into the world of concert films? Are you familiar with any concert films? And if so, do you think that that's a good sort of medium?
Like documentary style stuff?
Yeah.
I watched the Coachella one when I was feeling nostalgic for not being able to go to Coachella for the first time in 10 years. And yeah, it's very inspiring. I mean, honestly, I feel like documentary stuff must be very difficult because there's so much B-roll. Like you're having to shoot constantly and hope that something happens. And it's always amazing when you see a documentary where something wild happens in the middle of it and it's like, holy shit, we just caught lightning in a bottle. But I don't know that I would have the patience for that. I don't think I would. I'm more interested in storytelling and screenwriting.
And similar question before, I was asking about music films. Do you have any favorite music documentaries? Like, remember years ago they had Madonna's thing, Truth or Dare. Justin Bieber's got a thing out now, came out a couple years ago. Do you have any that you are a big fan of that you think were really well crafted?
I mean, Truth or Dare is a masterpiece, obviously. And also randomly, I remember like the Justin Bieber thing came out like 8 years ago or something, and I was like flying back from China and it was playing on the I never would have watched it otherwise. It was playing on the airplane, and it was because he was just a kid that everyone was like, oh, he's so cheesy and da, da, da. And then I watched this documentary. I was like, oh my god, I was like in tears by the end. I was just like, what a story, what a gift. So it's funny how documentaries really humanize people and make them more lovable and relatable. And also, you know, when there's household names that you kind of write off as like, oh, there's just nothing to it. Like, in order to become a household name, you have to have something and you have to work really hard. So I feel like any documentary like that, there's going to be a beautiful story behind it and you walk away with a new appreciation for what it takes to be whoever it is.
And now, so in looking at music soundtracks, would you recommend that filmmakers start thinking about the music beforehand, or make the film first, get it all together, get a rough cut together, and then start thinking about the music?
I think you got it. I mean, one big thing I learned in this experience was get your edit locked before you do anything with music. Because I had an edit that I thought was locked, and I sent all of my stuff over to my sound guy to edit the sound, and then I started scoring it. And then once a few of my friends had seen it, I got some feedback. Everyone had the same feedback that the beginning was too long. And so I had to cut out like 30 seconds from the top of the film, and going back and trying to rescore it and I mean, it was a nightmare. It took me, and I mean, it took me months to figure that out. So the most important thing the big lessons that I learned doing this thing on my own was get your picture locked, get your edit locked before you do anything, coloring, sound, music, anything like that. And then also I learned that it's really hard to direct yourself when you're not behind the camera. So it's important to have another pair of eyes that you trust, because look, I mean, I'm very happy with it and my DP was amazing, but had I had the time and the wherewithal to look at each shot and make sure it was framed exactly the way I wanted it and all of that, it would have looked really different. So yeah, those are the two things I learned. But as far as music stuff goes, I mean, a lot of films, when they come to me looking for a song, they'll have a placeholder, and that makes it easier for me. And I do think that it can like set a tone for a scene, but I think that the storytelling is the most important thing, and the music is like the icing on top. So I would get your story straight, make sure your story is strong, don't rely on music for that.
Now, once the film is complete, or even beforehand, would you recommend an original composition that independent filmmakers should bring on a composer? Or do you think it's a better move to license or attempt to license music that's already known, in terms of what do you think would help the marketability, if you will?
I think that it's a lot easier to just like bring in your own people. It's going to be cheaper and it's going to be easier. If you have your heart set on a song that is a big song that everybody knows, it may be a battle. And, you know, it could be that the artist relates with your story, with your film, and so they may, you know, negotiate. But again, you're still going to have to deal with the red tape of the publishers and the labels. But these days with online streaming and everything, there are a lot of big independent artists, and they have a lot more say in what happens because they own the masters. So there may be similar songs or artists that sound like the big thing that you want, that are independent and easier to get to and easier to work with. Not to say that you shouldn't try to reach out to these bigger artists or license these songs, but I'm just warning you, it will be a pain in the ass.
If a filmmaker wants to try to reach out to an artist or to a record label, how do you go about that? Like, do you send let's say a query letter via email? Do you have to go through an agent? How?
Usually you would go through, figure out who their publishers are. Usually that is on their Wikipedia. Find out who the label is and reach out to their publishers. And also, like, if you, I mean, I get a lot of DMs on Instagram that are like, hey, I want to use your song for this or that. And I definitely see those and respond to those and send them to my publisher. And I'm like, hey, let's work this out. So trying to get directly to the artist is a way to do it. Although I'm kind of a weird artist in that I control everything I do, but a lot of artists are, signed to record labels and don't really have a say. But if you get on their good side and they love your story, then you never know.
I'm sorry, I had one other question in the same realm. Oh yeah, so if a filmmaker wants to wants an original composition for their film, what's the best way to find a composer? Do you Google music composers, or is there a certain union or organization or guild that perhaps they should contact?
That is a good question. And, you sent me a couple questions in the email before this just to kind of get an idea of what we'd be talking about. And it's like, it's so hard for me to say because I have never had to do that, because I just am already like in the middle of the music industry. And so I can just like, throw a stone and find a composer. But it could be that you look at some other filmmakers that have put things out and see who scored their stuff and then contact them that way. I think that would probably, if I had to find someone, I would probably go about it that way. I'd look at other people that are kind of like on the same level that I'm on, and take a look at who scored it and reach out to them. I mean, obviously everybody wants work. So like I wouldn't feel shy about reaching out to somebody. People want to work. So usually a quick Google of a name you see in a credit is a good way to start.
Okay. And, I'm going to ask you a question that's music related, but also film related. So, nowadays, a lot of filmmakers are self-distributing their films. Mm-hmm. So, yes, you still have a lot of filmmakers that still want to be acquired for distribution, have their film licensed by a distribution company, but you also have filmmakers that are self-distributing. Now, music, same thing. I mean, I guess any musician can essentially release their own music. Mm-hmm. So in the world of music, would you recommend self-releasing music, or do you think it's a better idea to go with a record label? I know music is separate from film, but it's a similar question that filmmakers are asking.
Well, I would love to ask you the same once I give my answer about film stuff. As a musician, I would say that I've had several major label record deals, and there is the perk of the money, not for yourself, but for your project, where they have promo teams. And PR is kind of like the most important thing when it comes to just like getting your name out there and doing campaigns and all of that. But then they own your masters, then you owe them money, then they have a say in the creative process. And I just personally really I'm just a control freak, and I like to have a say in everything that I do. I don't want someone to tell me how my video is going to look or how my music should sound. And I also don't want any kind of barrier between me and my audience. And that's the beautiful thing about being an independent artist, is that if I feel like putting something out on Tuesday, then I put it out. And if I feel like making a music video for that 3 years later, I can do that. And no one's going to be like, well, that song's old, and so that's not relevant. I can do whatever I want. And that's what I love. But, there is, I put out a song called American Girl on Epic Records, and that was my biggest song as an artist. And that's because there was money behind it. There was real money behind it. But when I put out my independent EP, Bombastic, I got 1 million syncs. I got a million huge movie trailers and movie moments and TV stuff and all that. And I made my money back because I'm independent, because it's easy. So I can gather a bunch of little things all over the place because there's no red tape. So I personally feel like releasing independently, using your money, if you have any budget at all for PR and for digital marketing, you can do anything. If you know how to use social media as the very powerful tool that it is, then you can get more leverage and you can get an audience. And then the labels will come a sniffing. And if you want to sell your soul, then you can. But I'm curious, as a novice filmmaker myself, like, I don't even know, like I made a short film. Great, cool. It was just kind of an art project experiment that I did. I'm putting it in festivals. That's exciting and cool. I just want people to see it. I don't really have any particular goals with it. I don't even know what short films do. Like as far as independently releasing something or not, like do people release short film? I don't even know how this works. This is my first time.
But you know, there are certain outlets like Shorts TV, even Amazon has some short films on it, Netflix has some short films on it. If you wanted to self-distribute, you can go through places like Amazon Video Direct, you can go through Vimeo on demand. You know, there's a lot of outlets. There are sales agents that you can work with. However, most sales agents generally work with feature films, but I'm sure there are some perhaps that would work with a short film. Um, Obviously, there's YouTube. Very hard to see a return on YouTube, but I guess it's it's one option.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, there certainly are options out there. In terms of the in terms of in releasing something independently and how great that is, and that's awesome, and I totally am a big supporter of that. So with your credits, if you were to put something out there independently, and people see your bio, they're going to say, "Oh wow, that's very cool," and you've got certainly have an audience in place. Now, if there's a musician sort of just starting out and they don't have those type of credits, how would you go about how would you recommend to go about building an audience? And this goes for filmmakers too, because a lot of them, they're self-distributing. You have to build an audience also.
Yeah. I think that the most powerful tool, especially in Hollywood, and this is what everyone's like, oh, Hollywood's so schmoozy and da da da. But like, there is strength in numbers. You're not going to get anywhere if you're an island. So it's great you want to be independent. It's great you want to do your thing and be a lone wolf, but collaboration is key. So if you find other artists that are in your same realm, have the same kind of audience, doing collaborations, doing, I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, but doing like social media posts together, stuff like that. Like, I mean, over the years, I've talked to a million different companies about like digital media and how to get your numbers up and all that bullshit, which is, I hate it. I hate it so much. But kind of the number one thing is like find other people that are doing it, and then you get their audience too. So I think it's really about collaboration, and it's the same thing with songwriting. If you're a songwriter, it's great you can write everything by yourself, but like then you're the only one that gives a shit. If you have 3 other co-writers, then you have 3 other people and whoever works with them that are going to push it, that are going to get it out there. So I think that collaboration is key to help gain followers and playing shows with other artists that have followings and stuff. So it's really about building a community.
Yeah,
and that's really how Hollywood works, you know?
Yeah, I knew of someone some years ago. They would add a band, and they would get other bands, and they'd all. This was a little bit some years ago when the CDs were still a thing, and they would put out a CD, and they'd all, each of them would put like 2 songs on that CD, and there'd be a whole bunch of bands, and they, that way they share each other's audiences essentially.
Totally, and it's the same way now where bands will make playlists and like put all their buddies on it, and that's really kind of the name of the game. It's like, because everyone's on the internet. That's the new world. And I mean, it's something new, I guess, but it's just like kind of weird and sad to kind of adjust to being a slave to an algorithm. But that's how we live in, so you have to embrace it,
We had a question in the chat box. We have to wrap it up in just a few, but we had a question in the chat box about what would you say is most fulfilling about directing?
Most fulfilling about directing. I think, I mean, what I learned from this experience is that it's not just directing. It's directing, it's editing, it's scoring, it's performing. It's like, I really had my hands on everything. And so I think that if I had just directed and then handed it to an editor and I wasn't happy with the edit, that it would not be fulfilling. I think if I had someone else direct it and then I edited whatever, I like having control. And it's a blessing and a curse because I've been so overwhelmed doing all of this on my own. But I love seeing something come to life, having a vision in my head and then seeing it come to life on the screen. And it's really fun to work with a team of people because songwriting can be kind of isolating. So it's fun to have a team, Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And if there are any aspiring songwriters here, You've written music with some of the biggest names in the world.
Mhm.
You have any advice for people who maybe want to be songwriters? How do you get to that level? What steps did you take?
I mean, I basically grew up in it. I moved here at 16 and did the whole thing. And I just like lived here long enough and hung around long enough and survived in Hollywood long enough that I ended up meeting the right people. And I was fortunate enough to study under Max Martin, who is like the king of pop. I think he is now the biggest, has the most number ones of anyone in history. And so I would recommend studying those songs and also like watching interviews or whatever with people that write music that you love, because there is a formula. As much as everyone wants to think that art is just like, oh, it's just like free for all, there's a reason why. First of all, pop is short for popular, and that means that it appeals to a mass audience. And the way you appeal to a mass audience is by telling a human story. And so it's important to tell a human story in a unique way, tell a familiar story in a unique way. And that also comes with the formula of pop songwriting. And there are lots of mathematical rules and regulations and whatever that really help. So I would do some research on structure and watch some interviews and stuff of some of the people that write the things that you love.
Okay.
Study.
Just curious, somebody who's had your type of success, what are some of your favorite songs of all time? Like maybe
Oh.
three that are.
I mean, when I was a kid, one of my favorite songs of all time was Bohemian Rhapsody, because it went on such a journey. And there was something, just as a child, hearing like mama just killed a man, put a gun against his head, pulled the trigger, now he's dead. And like the idea of this son talking to his mother, I was just like blown away. Like it, and the melody was so haunting. But I grew up listening to Tina Turner and Whitney Houston, and Michael Jackson was my favorite. Michael Jackson still is my favorite, even after all his shit. Like, it takes a village. It's not one person that made that music. That was a whole team of genius people. So I can't write it all off. But I don't know. I think Michael Jackson and Madonna and Prince were like my favorites growing up.
Cool. And final question: do you have a favorite a favorite film composition? Is there a film that you say this is the best music for a movie?
Oh, I think my favorite soundtrack that I wore the CD out to death was Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet.
Oh,
I really loved that. And I also loved the Pulp Fiction soundtrack. Was me too. Yeah.
All right, very cool. Okay, so April Kills the Vibe is on the Big Apple Film Festival virtual festival this weekend. You can check it out on the website. It should be all good and up and running. As soon as we get off here, I'll make sure it is. April Kills the Vibe is available all weekend at bigappleFilmFestival.com. Also at the Drive-In, Demarest Farms Drive-In Theater this weekend. Come catch April Kills the Vibe, as well as a whole bunch of other great short films and feature films as well. And I want to thank Bonnie McKee for being here today and taking the time to speak with me and all of you. And we really appreciate everything you're doing, and we thank you for this film, April Kills the Vibe. It's a very special film, and really strongly recommend that everyone here sees it and has the opportunity to see it. And thank you so much.
I just wanted to say this is going to be, the Drive-In Theater is the first time it's ever going to be seen on a big screen. So I'm just super excited about it. I'm really grateful, and I'm just honored and humbled. So thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you so much, and good luck with everything, and we'll keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your questions. Bye, guys.
Bye now.